Welcome to your Gaza War sit rep day 209. Hmm. No end in sight. There was another leaked deal. I don't know if you saw that, John. Looked
Uh,
like another deal guaranteed by Qatar, Egypt, and America. Some prisoner exchanges, and then Israel goes back to war. So it's like,
yeah, but they
it's this,
made them respond by yesterday, and Qassam ignored that.
yeah.
And apparently, Al Jazeera is reporting tonight that Sinwar is making some changes. So, 7 months into the war,
Some changes.
Sinwar is still
They've told
communicating.
they've told them what they want. And it's never changed. It has never changed, and it's never gonna change. I don't know why they keep doing this. Well, I mean, I know why they keep doing this. That was rhetorical. Okay, but other things that are going on. Turkey says they're not going to trade with Israel anymore. I don't believe them,
Me neither.
but they said it. Colombia says they're not going to have any relations with Israel. I believe that. Colombia is a democratic country, so they could have an election
Oh, that
and
Colombia.
Colombia, yeah. Gustavo Petro. But they could have that's the thing with democracies, right? The democracies can always have a right wing come to power and reverse it. But right now, Gustavo Petro's government won't be having relations with Israel. There was I don't know if you remember, but Gustavo Petro sent one of the greatest tweets in all of history. Basically, the Israeli ambassador insulted him and said he was an anti-Semite or something. This was a long time ago. You were probably on the sit rep when I talked about it, but he was basically like, you don't disrespect the president of Colombia like this. And then he talked about all the things that Israel did in Colombia and how they supported the paramilitaries and everything. And he said, one day your generals are going to apologize for everything they did in our country and will embrace and will then the spirit of Hitler will really have been killed because you guys are keeping it alive or whatever. So it was one of the most dignified, nasty tweets I've ever seen. Pretty special. So Colombia says that the UCLA and on the Student Intifada front, the UCLA and Colombia encampments have been destroyed by the police and fascist mobs in the case of UCLA. But there are new encampments that have arisen and to take their place. That the whole thing that happened at UCLA that has unlocked new levels of rage that I did not have.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. I was just
I was
talking
not
about that as
aware.
well.
I was not aware that I had that additional rage in me, but to unleash a mob of fascists to beat students and launch firecrackers at them and
And have the police step down at just that moment.
yeah,
That was really interesting to see.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're going to have to defend themselves. I mean, I don't,
yeah,
if that's going to be a thing. Um,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're not legally allowed to defend yourself against a police officer, but those weren't police officers.
no. Well, they might have been.
Yeah, they weren't in uniform and they hadn't identified themselves as such. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. That was something beyond belief. And then you think about like everything that they're doing is to say that these encampments and these student protesters are offending the feelings of the pro-Israel students. And then they bring these pro-Israel people on to campus to
Yeah, they played
physically,
crying baby noises
yeah.
to taunt them. I can't even watch sports matches because the cheering crowd triggers me these days.
I
I
know.
can't imagine what kind of a psycho plays that 7 months into a genocide.
That's interesting that you said that about sports. I had an interesting reaction to celebrity culture. There's some kind of beef between rappers and like Drake and Kendrick Lamar and I just sort of all I wanted to know was what either of them had said about Gaza. And I was sort of like, oh, Drake signed a ceasefire letter. Kendrick Lamar, as far as I know, didn't. So I don't really care what happens. I just don't care about anything else. I'm just like, okay, well, that's all I need to know about these people.
Yeah, he cited New Ho King though, which is a great restaurant on Spadina that we used to go to when we were in high school and went to shows. So I was like,
Yeah,
I
don't
did
care.
see that story. I otherwise would not have known what you were talking about.
Yeah, don't care. Don't care. So yeah, it's whatever. New anti-Semitism bill making it actually illegal to criticize Israel. So they've been doing these like hortative motions or like things where they're like it's really bad to criticize Israel, but now it seems like they've actually passed a bill that will make it illegal to criticize Israel. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, they arrested a speaker at a from that spoke at a rally in Vancouver.
They arrested the Canadian police.
Yeah, they
Oh.
arrested her after the fact
For the speech
for
act.
the speech on the stairs of the art gallery.
And they said you're being charged with anti-Semitism under the law of
Yeah,
anti-Semitism.
I don't know exactly what the charge was, but yeah, essentially, yeah, from a speech.
Someone pointed out that it actually makes a lot of Jewish history illegal because there's quite a lot of Jewish figures, important Jewish figures that condemned Israel,
Yeah,
criticized
and
Israel.
are all over the encampments as well. It's an
Oh yeah,
absurd
present, yeah,
moment in
present and
history.
past. The chair of Jewish studies of Dartmouth was arrested and banned from campus. So Dartmouth is so pro-Israel that they've banned the chair of Jewish studies for 6 months.
And Columbia banned everybody. They just locked the campus gates and they told the NYPD that they have to guard until after graduation. They're deployed. The police were deployed by the administration preventatively. That's a remarkable development as well.
Like we've been talking for months about how the US is squandering its international credibility and dismantling the system of international law, but they're dismantling their domestic law and their domestic education system.
Yeah, and it's not going to work. Just like I don't want to get too much into history, but cracking down on protests doesn't work. It
You're
generally
not gonna
creates
crack
more.
you're not gonna crack the anti-genocide out of them. You're not gonna beat the anti-genocide out of them. They're not gonna be like, okay, fine, I like Israel now. It's
Yeah.
good. I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I was upset at 35,000, but now that we're at 42,000, I actually listen to what you're saying. It's crazy. In fact, it's they're going to bring their friends because their friends are going to be upset that their other friends were attacked and they weren't there. You didn't have to be in college for very long to know how that works. They're all sharing houses. They're all in the same places. The ability to build a critical mass out of this and to have the summer coming on, to have the Democratic National Convention happening this summer.
It's gonna happen on Zoom. They're gonna move it to Zoom. Watch. They're gonna move it online.
I mean, and that it in itself will be crazy. So
Yeah.
they're really in these strategic binds that it's really hard to see how they get out of them. I just like, we
It's
always go,
hard. Yeah. It's hard to see how they get out of them and keep doing the genocide. It's easy to see how they get out of it if they just stop. But
yeah, yeah, and they should stop because they're losing. They don't have the capacity to invade Rafah. Uh, yeah, it's the war in the north has escalated. I guess you're going to do the roundup. We kind of jumped ahead to the
that's okay.
discussion, but yeah, the war on the northern front is more this week than it was last week, and more last week than it was the week before. Uh,
And yeah, like to the past 24 hours have been lots of missile attacks in the usual like Brandon Barracks, Kfar Shaba Farms. But like 2 and 3 days ago, there were some big ones. Like you covered some of them. in the live stream, but like,
Yeah, I covered the ones in the live stream. I mean, there's so many Hezbollah videos. Like I
yeah.
just have to pick and choose through them. But the kind of attacks that we've seen in the last week and a half are the kind of attacks that in an open war, there would be second and third waves of. When that convoy is attacked and the front of the convoy is hit and the back of the convoy is hit,
Hmm.
that when the second and third wave comes becomes a mass casualty situation. And
Yeah.
Hezbollah, again, just like the masters of patience, they didn't escalate that, but they're just demonstrating that that is very possible to do.
Yeah.
And Israelis aren't going back to their communities in the north under this circumstance. So yeah,
That's
I,
Lebanon. Syria, Israel apparently just did an airstrike in Damascus. So if they hit an Iranian, if they hit any Iranian assets, well, we'll see. I just saw that. We'll see more.
I didn't see that.
Um, Bahrain has entered the chat, as the kids say. There was a drone from the resistance in Bahrain. Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
see that.
yeah, that's a new one. Let me tell you. Um, Let me just make sure I'll read some details for you, John. I'm so pleased that I get to be the one to tell you about this. Yeah, it's not it's a resistance group in Bahrain, and they said I think they may have even made a video that you can talk about.
Bahrain is home of the fifth U.S. Fifth Fleet,
That's the one.
so I believe that's what the Americans call a target-rich environment.
Right. But they launched towards Israel, and it's clearly like an Iranian drone. Bahraini Islamic resistance named Saraya al-Ashtar published footage showing their first ever operation targeting the headquarters of the Zionist TruckNet company responsible for land transportation in Eilat using a kamikaze drone. So, Saraya al-Ashtar.
Hmm.
And and then Iraq also. The resistance in Iraq, some cruise missiles, they call them the Al-Arqab missile. Do you know the Al-Arqab missile?
No, but I saw the launch. It does look like a qualitative improvement over the drones that they've been sending.
Let's see. Al-Arqab. It's an Iranian cruise missile. Yeah, long-range Iranian cruise missile. I don't know the it has apparently a yeah, long range. Well, so yeah, cruise missiles against Tel Aviv. And then West Bank. This is interesting, right? So last night, I guess they assat the Palestinian Authority. So the other night, I reported on like meetings between Hamas and Fatah in China, and they made like a general statement like we unity is important. These things happen essentially all the time, like Hamas Fatah meetings brokered by third parties, try to get them to come together. And then the day after that, the Palestinian Authority assassinated an important leader in Tulkarem. Uh,
In Nur Shams, where the Israelis had just wrapped up that 3.5 day operation that people were calling in Nur Shams were calling Little Gaza because they basically just destroyed everything, weren't able to get any resistance fighters, and just attacked civilian infrastructure and then left. And yeah, assassinated the leader, one of the leaders of the Nur Shams battalion, and he had survived multiple of these raids that are hunting him. Uh, and then he's killed by the PA. So that's definitely an escalation of the collaborator. Uh,
yeah, Ahmad Abu Al-Ful was his name. And there are lots of statements, Sarai al-Quds, Tubas. But importantly, Sarai al-Quds Tulkarem, Abu Shuja, the leader, Abu Shuja, they thought he was dead and he came out and in a rally and said hello that he's not that he's still alive. And he condemned the assassination, but it was very interesting because he and they're gonna have demonstrations tomorrow, but he basically also said we're not gonna go to war with the PA over this. He said, that's enough. He said all of the Palestinian Authority must stop its hand from our fighters, not just Tulkarem, but all the brigades in the West Bank,
Well, they tried
especially
to
in,
kill him too,
yeah,
just
yeah,
before the Nur Shams raid. He's from Nur Shams. He's the Tulkarem brigade commander, but he's from Nur Shams, so which is just the camp that's part of Tulkarem. But yeah, they attempted. I believe they opened fire on him.
yeah. They it was like a car. He was in his car, and
Yeah,
they just like this is the thing, right? Like it's like all these American institutions devoted to the rule of law, like the Palestinian authorities, like the law in
yeah.
theory,
They're
in
all trained by American soldiers.
and they're just opening fire on cars or like at UCL, like the just the lawlessness that you need to support Israel.
Yeah.
Um, it's
Yeah. Well, Jenin, I saw footage from Jenin where they've set up the resistance has set up a checkpoint
oh,
entering Jenin, and they told everyone to roll down their windows and approach the checkpoint. And
oh,
then they were handing out drinks to the locals. But yeah, just that there has to be now camp security
yeah,
for the PA and for Israel for yeah for these death squads that dress like Arabs or
or are
Palestinian death squads,
yeah.
PA death squads.
Okay,
It's a choice.
so
After 7 months of genocide, that's really a choice, as the kids would say. That's a
yeah,
choice to
yeah.
decide to go in and assassinate
Okay,
somebody that's not even trying. Like Soraya Al-Quds is not involved in government. They're not
yeah.
involved in trying to have a seat in government. They're purely a resistance movement. They're an action-based movement. They're not threatening the PA.
And it's bad enough to arrest such a person, which they do all the time, but just shoot him down in his car. I mean,
Yeah,
oof.
the Palestinians have incredible patience with internal fighting.
Yeah,
Um,
they do. Yeah.
they really do.
And it probably is gonna pay off. It's hard to watch, but it's probably right.
Yeah.
It's probably as much as you have to just take these blows. It's better than a tit for tat, and then you're fighting each other, which is exactly what Israel wants, right?
Yeah. It just can't be done haphazardly. It can't be done. It can't be a decision that's made by an armed group that
Yeah,
just had a leader assassinated. I think
right.
just very disciplined nationalist position that you don't start a civil war over that, and the PA has to be overthrown by the people. Um,
I mean,
but
it
this
is
is
in a lot of ways it's more than half overthrown. I mean, like when they're like Noor al-Shams is an example. When there's anything serious that has to be done, the Israelis do it themselves now. The PA is not able to do a 3-day battle for a camp. They withdraw. They let the Israelis do the fighting. And if the Israelis are doing the fighting, what's the point? What's the point?
But then they're firing on like they fire on the funerals, right? They
Yeah,
move out of the area,
yeah,
they allow the Israelis to invade, then the Israelis leave and
yeah,
leave dead, murdered,
yeah.
innocent people and fighters, and then they have a funeral and the PA fires on the funeral. So just really cowardly way of operating.
Cowardice is definitely the word of the day and the word of the week after UCLA and Columbia. Um, Malik Houthi, or Syed Abdul Malik Badr al-Din al-Houthi, gave a speech, the commander of Ansarallah. Some interesting stuff, praises the American university students, but he's got some interesting stuff about Israel's economy. He says the letters of the Zionist prisoners held by Qassam caused a violent shock among the enemy masses. Lots of big demonstrations in Tel Aviv definitely followed. What? So he's talking
All
about
over
that.
Israel. There was the other
All
day
over
there
Israel.
was 52 demonstrations.
Wow. And the video from these, they're big. They're really big. Thousands and thousands of people, lots of fighting police. I mean, it's
So how does a ceasefire agreement happen under those terms when Israel agrees to it and their government collapses?
well,
It's
yeah.
just a multi-layered. Everybody like Blinken begging basically not to get ahead of ourselves, but Blinken's obviously begging Hamas to accept the prisoner, to
Yeah.
accept the ceasefire proposal because they have 1,000 soldiers that are about to dock on the shore of Gaza that
Yeah.
they must have believed there was going to be a ceasefire before that because those ships have been in, as they call it, in theater. They had been in theater for over a week, and that week was the week that Blinken believed that he had given a proposal that Hamas would accept.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. But
So did they? And they they can't build this pier under the circumstances of what's been happening in the last few days. Because I guess Gaza's next, or am I interrupting Yemen right now?
yeah, let me finish. Let me finish the speech, and then yes, Gaza, Pier, and we'll talk about that. But he says the Israeli enemy's debts have reached an unprecedented level. Prices have risen. Total damage to agricultural sector reached 70% according to enemy media, and 40% of farmers lost their jobs. There's complete recession in the real estate sector, estimated at more than 20 billion. Operations in northern Palestine include damaging factories, damaging many aspects. And then he goes into his own, yeah, Ansarallah in Yemen's role, all of the things they've done. And he says, now they have to worry about the Indian Ocean. The Red Sea is a small pond compared to the vastness of the Indian Ocean. Experts wonder how Yemen was able to monitor and target maritime objectives, including moving ones without having a naval fleet or satellites. He
Yeah, so
didn't
they
answer.
got that ship. The ship they hit was the first ship they've hit in the Indian Ocean. And Ansarallah said that that ship 2 weeks previously had misidentified on its transponder what port it was going into. So they allowed them through the strait and then they changed their transponder and went to Israel. So Ansarallah tracked that ship leaving Israel a week and a half later out in the Indian Ocean and hit them in the Indian Ocean. So that's definitely a development.
Yeah.
And yeah,
He comment.
not to add on to what he said, but the economy, the construction, maybe he was looping that in with real estate, but construction is more than 70% of construction projects are frozen solid since October 7th. Nothing at all. They don't have any workers to staff the
Mhm.
construction sites. And that's the kind of thing that over,
Yeah.
months and years starts to pile up in a way that, yeah, a lot of these things, it's really hard to see how it goes back into the tube after this.
So yeah, and then he says, oh, interesting. He talks about Africa too, like Niger and the other countries that are expelling Americans. Awareness of colonial policies is expanding more and more. Many countries are freeing themselves from American dominance, moving away from it. So yeah, good speech from Malik Houthi. So now Gaza, here, let's talk about the Pier totally bizarre situation. You sent me an AP image. I'm gonna get it
Yeah,
organized and
sorry to our EI followers. I'm going to show these same images again, but these images were released for the first time, and we've been speculating for weeks, maybe months, where the pier was going to be, and we there was never any confirmation. Not from CENTCOM. CENTCOM had no idea where the pier was going to end. They go into these House Armed Services Committees meetings that you played on the show the other day,
yeah.
and they get grilled on it. And it's clear they had no idea where they were going. and how this was going to work. So they
So,
really are flying by the seat of their pants. There's no way this was an original, like months long project.
and yet, and I think you're right, but then I also think if they thought this was going to be a ceasefire, they could have also had a ceasefire at any time by meeting Hamas's conditions. So I guess they thought they could get Hamas to agree to less than their basic conditions, which I don't, and I also, yeah, anyway, take us through it so that I can
Okay.
make some
So first of
commentary.
all, it's a $320 million project that the Pentagon is investing. To put it in perspective, the Israelis gave 400 million to rebuild the Gaza envelope. So you're talking about a significant project here, involving 1,000 US soldiers. What we're looking at here is the diagram from the Defense Department. Essentially, the way this is going to work is the commercial vessels are going to dock in Cyprus. In Cyprus, there's going to be an IDF base in Cyprus that inspects the goods at this base. So the IDF, rather than having them on the border crossings and letting thousands of trucks in, they're going to dispatch them to Cyprus to inspect the ships. The ships are then going to sail the 200 miles from Cyprus, and they're going to dock on this floating pier, or sorry, this floating dock. The floating dock is anchored to the sea floor, and it's about 3 or 4 miles offshore. So that's the boat at the top there that you see. It's the green is all of the trucks on the ship. So then trucks are going to go from the dock onto the ship and take the goods off the ship, drive them onto this dock, and on from the dock onto US Army vessels. The US Army vessels can carry 15 trucks on the large vessels and 5 trucks on the small vessels. That is the equivalent of 20 minutes of clearance at a single crossing by Israel. Israel says it can clear 50 trucks an hour at a single crossing, and there's 7 crossings in Gaza that could be doing that. So these numbers are important because uh, the logistics that go into this. So you unload the trucks off of the ship, which isn't a proper ship for unloading trucks. It goes onto a floating dock that doesn't have offloading capacity in the way that the border crossings do. Then they're going to put all these trucks onto these vessels, sail the vessels the 3 miles to the pier, which goes like 2 kilometers out to sea. The vessels will park on that pier and the trucks will drive off the pier, which is apparently going to be attached to the shore. They've started building it. They started building it on Monday, and they started with the dock, not with the pier. So there's still lots about this story that, first of all, that they don't know. But the dock is the first part. That part's the easy part because it's just floating out at sea. Palestinians are already blockaded from being out there anyway. So that's the easy part. But then this pier that you see, that's 1,800 foot causeway. It's like Legos, essentially. They all clip together. I say Legos because it's temporary, although the new Lego kits are sort of permanent. But from kids, when we were kids, Legos were, you took them apart. And that's what this pier is. It's a temporary pier. It has to be constantly reattached to be anchored to the ground. So even if you can't even say something like, well, they'll leave it behind and the Palestinians can use it. That's not the case because it's basically literally floating docks, and they have to be constantly reattached to the floor because the currents move them like a ship anchor. It's not a permanent, there's nothing permanent about this part of the project. And then they're going to drive the trucks down this pier and into Gaza on the Gaza shoreline along this Netzarim corridor that we've been talking about for months that they've been destroying and is the original checkpoint that divided the Gaza Strip in half. That people call it Netzarim corridor because it existed previously when the settlers and soldiers were in Gaza. So they just renamed it that. But yeah, these trucks are then going to come on shore, but the trucks are being driven, according to the Americans, are being driven by somebody that they won't say yet who is driving the trucks. Um, and so somebody who's not been named yet is going to drive the trucks onto the shore and then unload the trucks on shore. And then trucks from the Palestinian side are going to come down to the shore and reload the trucks. It's insane. And at its maximum, it's going to be, its first maximum will be 90 trucks a day, which is less than 2 hours at a single crossing
Okay.
with, but then but then
Yeah.
the goods are then just on the Gaza shore. So then they
Yeah.
have to be reloaded somehow off the Gaza shore onto Gazan trucks and distributed. Um, and this entire corridor is under attack and has been since this port was mentioned. 5 attacks a day, but 5 different groups are claiming attacks on the corridor, mortar attacks, short range rocket attacks, rocket artillery attacks that are all well within reach. The Pentagon spokesperson said that the American forces are well out of mortar range, but that's just clearly not true. There's no way in Gaza to create a buffer zone that put mortars out of the range of this port. So this is
Well,
just the Americans walking into.
this is so not what it says. There's no way this is what it says it is.
Show the other pictures because look at this what they've done. They've basically cleared the entire, they flattened the entire corridor area. They rebuilt the bridges across Wadi Gaza. They needed to be reinforced. That's what the Netzarim operation was, the Zahra operation was. Um, they've completely cleared out this chunk of space, 67-acre space. Um,
Is this what it
No,
is?
and the was there one
Sorry.
this from CENTCOM had ones where it showed the pier, and then the Israelis published drone and photographs of the area. And anyways, there's nothing to see. It's just flattened,
Oh,
but it's like beach flattened, people's homes, people's farms, schools, hospitals, the whole works, completely eliminated in order
this one?
to, and that's the Legos. Do you see how temporary that is? They fit together in pieces like that. And that's the key. This is an emergency transportation battalion. This is like an, they haven't operated in 20 years, but they're for like disasters when there's like an earthquake or something, and then that's how they make a temporary pier. So they're not even investing $320 million into something that will be useful to Palestinians after, which was, I think, a question that we had about it. And we were a little bit like because we keep saying over and over that the thing that Gaza needs the most is a port. But that's categorically not what this is. And there's more questions. That was all the technical information. The fact that there's 6 layers of loading and unloading, um, while you have 7 land crossings that have thousands of trucks. We have satellite footage that shows like Reuters number was 3,200 at least just in Egypt that are lined up that could come in, and they could come in immediately. And so this project is putting American soldiers and sailors into an active combat zone, which is why if you heard Blinken he was basically begging. I don't know what other word to describe the way his voice was shrill, saying Hamas has to accept this extraordinarily generous offer, you know, because their their good idea, their plan to get Israel out of or to get Joe Biden reelected or whatever the reason for this stupid Pier was. Um, it comes with massive risk to the American project and to the Israeli project that basically just relies on Palestinians not attacking it. And Palestinians have said, all the factions have said, if anyone but Palestinians accepts this aid on shore, they'll be considered an occupying force.
The
And
diagram that we just showed from the Department of Defense says the aid trucks drive off the ships and down the causeway onto the beach where they're unloaded in an area secured by Israeli forces.
yeah, and it's going to have to be Israeli forces that are in the water. And I don't know if we're going to see that in the next week if while we're watching this, but
Are there
they're going to have to
areas,
get into the water to affix the pier to the shore. There's no
are
other
there
way.
are there areas of Gaza secured by Israeli forces? You'd have to have a loose definition of secured.
Yeah, very loose definition of secured.
But yeah, so I never thought I never thought that it was about gas. I still don't. I don't think it's about gas, but are they trying to create a system for efficiently supplying the Israeli troops via this pier, like occupying troops? Are they, is it a ethnic cleansing plan? Like push the people out to sea, put like literally push them into the sea? Uh,
I don't think there is a plan. I'm still sticking with that. This
you're sticking with
doesn't
that, right?
seem to me like an overarching plan. Even the ceasefire even contradicts what's going to happen because coming out of the Cairo talks was this plan that the ceasefire
You
would
allow more
involve
trucks.
the first 7 days would involve some number released and Israel opening the coastal road. And then after 22 days, more prisoners are released and Israel opens
The central road.
Saladin Road, the main artery up through the middle of Gaza. So if they're to accept the proposal that's on the table, the road that Israel's blocking with this port, the coastal road that Palestinians tried to go up with their families last week and were shot by the Israelis, that road would go through that area. And Israel has grand plans for this now, for this
Sure,
corridor. They want to put a base there. They want to
sure.
put a terminal there where all of the people coming north will have to filter through this terminal. But those things aren't built right now.
Those things have to be defended,
And then those things have to be defended.
and those things will come under continuous attack. What,
Yeah.
what,
And the
what?
ceasefire proposal presumes that in stages, Israel is going to withdraw
Yeah,
from Gaza. Um, so you could have this situation where Israel's withdrawing and the Americans are standing there at the port,
what?
and it's not secured. And
No, there's
Palestinians don't attack the Americans. They don't attack.
right, right.
Yeah. So it's a lot of these questions are unknown.
But they will attack if they're attacked.
They'll
Um,
attack Israelis on the corridor for
yeah.
sure. It's not enough
Dim
aid. It's because it's only 90 to 150 trucks. It's not enough aid for the Palestinians to look at this project and say, this is something that we need to protect.
no,
This
no, that's
right?
right. That's right.
It's it
D Dimitri Lascaris, he's a Canadian lawyer, pro-Palestine lawyer and activist. He's channeling. This is how I feel too. Like he doesn't know what it is, but he knows it's not for Palestinians. He's like, it's 100% certainty the Gaza Pier is not being constructed to help Palestinians. Whatever Israel's motive may be for consenting to the construction of the pier, there's one certainty: the pier has nothing to do with aiding Palestinians and will be used ultimately to violate Palestinian rights. I think that's right. I don't know that they're either too smart. You're right that they could be making it up as they go along. I am afraid they're too smart for me, and there's something happening here that I just can't. I just feel so like I'm missing some huge thing. I know, and I know
No,
people in the comments are gonna try to help me out, and they're gonna say it's about gas and
it's
it's
about
about ethnic
gas. It's
cleansing.
yeah. Neither of those things are going to happen, right? So
No, none of
ethnic
this is.
cleansing requires the Palestinians to get on the boats, and we know that's not happening. So
Mm.
that's not serious. The Americans aren't going to facilitate that with boats by people who aren't going to
Yeah.
go.
But this is
Um,
fa there are these are many plans that the Israelis and the Americans have been making are based on fantasies, and this could be a fantasy of ethnic cleansing that we're seeing them trying to make reality. The other thing is Rafah. I know we've been talking about how there will be warning. I have seen some sign. I mean, the intensification of airstrikes on Rafah is a sign. The way they've talked about it has been a sign. I did see some footage of like about 40, I counted about 40 armored vehicles, not a super reliable source or channel. Like I don't even remember what it was, but it was sort of like they were showing all the armored vehicles lined up at Kerem Shalom.
yeah,
Uh,
they had a training exercise for one of the forces. A couple of battalions had a
so
training exercise, and yeah, I keep saying you'll see the buildup, but there's lots of ways to invade. Like they can invade however they
right,
decide
yeah,
is invading. Their own
exactly.
population doesn't get news reporting from Gaza. They can tell them that they're invading and have it be a limited operation.
Yeah.
I've been saying that if it's going to match previous invasions and if it's going to match what they say, the Israelis say there's at least 15,000 Qassam fighters in Rafah. Um, so
Mm,
they can't just if they're going to attempt to fight like they have in other cities, it's a months long fight with a lot of troops that are very visible.
hmm.
But yeah, no, they could invade. They
Yeah,
could limited invasion, and also people are being massacred every single day in
exactly.
Rafah. And because people are still there, we have the situation where whole houses are falling on families, like was happening, or
Yeah.
like happens in other places. But at least when people were out of the north and they were dropping houses, they weren't dropping them on entire families like they are in Rafah again. And Rafa's 40% destroyed, according to the satellite imagery.
Wow.
So it's not like, and goes on every day just
Yeah.
because there's no ground war. They're still being attacked every day. But to begin an operation in Rafah, I think that we're looking. I would say that we're looking at something that's many weeks away, a month
Mm,
away, if they build straight up towards that. And there's no way the Israelis can invade Rafah and destroy four battalions of Qassam in a few weeks, although their planners say 6 weeks. I think the Wall Street Journal had a source that was saying 1 month it's going to start in a month and it'll take 6 weeks. And both those numbers just seem like um, they're not serious. That's not if you're there, but Israel doesn't have a serious war plan. So they
no.
can go in and destroy Rafah and
That's what
create,
I think. That's what
but
I
then
think. I think they could do. I mean, what did they do in Khan? How long was Khan Yunis?
early
If you
December they invaded Khan Yunis.
and they
4 full months
yeah.
and they got nothing accomplished in Khan Yunis.
So yeah, I mean, I don't see why I don't see anything stopping them from repeating the Khan Yunis model in
Well,
Rafah.
then that's 6 months from now. So
Oh,
their
you
people are
think it'll
going to
take them
be.
that long?
Well, if you're taking 4 months from the beginning of the invasion, it'll take them several weeks to build up for an invasion of that size. Um, and then, yeah, 4 months of
Yeah,
4 months of Con Yunis, yeah, it would take
4 months
it
of
to,
atrocity.
pretty much 6 months. But it's not in Israel's interest to have civilians, even though they don't care about civilians. It's not in their interest to have civilians in the battle space. It's so they need to have a plan to move people out. And so the logical thing from Israel's point of view would be to allow people to move back home, which the ceasefire proposal has in it.
I don't
Um,
know. I'm not confident about that statement. I'm not confident that it's not in their interest to have civilians in the battle space. I mean, that's exactly what they, especially in the opening phase, right? In Gaza City, they, but
oh
they,
yeah.
right? They started the war and thought about, oh, we should ethnically cleanse these areas before we continue. So there was
Yeah.
quite a period at the beginning, and I don't see why they wouldn't do that again. So I think we'll see. We have a little split here on the sit rep. I think the Rafah invasion is coming sooner than later. Um, that's the way I read the politics, and it's irrational, but it's irrational in exactly the way that they've been irrational so far. They're like the mistake of trying to analyze it as a military logic is,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
yeah,
That's a fair point because we've done 6 months of these sit reps that show time and time again that there's no military logic to what's
yeah,
happening. Yeah, it's a catastrophe. People are
yeah,
really scared in Rafah. Our friends are really scared. The word coming from aid organizations, even just moving people north is a disaster because Khan Yunis is completely destroyed. There's
yeah.
unexploded ordnance everywhere. The middle camps are already packed. There's nowhere for people to go. I know we've been saying that for 7 months, but now there really is. If you're not going to allow people to move back to the north, and it sounds like that's what the negotiations right now are, as in the number of people that are allowed to head back north, the demographics of who's being allowed to go back north.
And I think in a way, in a very American Israeli methods of making war for cameras and making war for show, the corridor and the pier could be part of this picture they're building of we're going to cut Gaza in half forever, and you're going to you're going to give concessions to us based on our ability to open and close the the ability of people and things to go between North and South Gaza, as opposed to sealing all of Gaza. They have a longer term vision of a more cut off, enclaved, just a little bit more cut off, a little bit more divided into pieces, a little bit more control of the people within the pieces, a little less contiguity between the territory, and that kind of makes sense to me. That is how they think, and that's how they approach this question.
Yeah, and it's how they've approached the question for 70 or
Yeah.
60 years, right? Since this what was it, the 50s, the 50s and 60s. And Ariel Sharon's plan was to cut up the territory because it makes it more manageable. It
Yeah.
makes it as more manageable as a military commander to be able to use that corridor to strike Gaza City. To strike Gaza City, right? That's the key. You don't have to fight your way through Shujaiya every time.
Hmm.
But yeah, like you always say, you got to win the war to do that.
You gotta know where to do that.
And they're not winning the war.
No.
And they're not getting their people back. So,
And some of their people seem to want their people, whether Netanyahu does or not, or the leadership or the cult that he's managed to create of people saying we don't want our own children back. There do seem to be tens of thousands, if not more, of Israelis who actually want the hostages back and who want a deal.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Israelis don't think they're winning the war anymore either. And they haven't achieved any of their goals. And that's why there's so many layers to this, to the bind and the in the domestic situation for Israel.
And
Um,
America now.
And I think that this port, though, I think we can't look at it separately from the
Hmm.
domestic political concerns in the United States. I think
Hmm.
Biden was facing a lot of pressure from people to be acting on the Israelis, and he obviously is unable to do that. And so this is their uh, attempt to say we built a pier and we're ramping up aid every day. Um, I mean, Israel showed just the other day that they could let in hundreds of trucks if they want to, even under these current circumstances. And when the pier is functioning at its fullest, which presumes that you have a massive buy-in on the Palestinian side to unload all of
Hmm.
these trucks.
Under the watchful gaze of Israeli soldiers
Yeah.
who are gonna be just inspecting and doing whatever other God knows what they do, making TikToks.
Yeah, it's a crazy moment. These ceasefire talks have been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
We've been sit repping these for a
yeah,
long time. I was flipping through my notes and there's ceasefire notes that look identical.
identical, identical.
They look identical.
Well, I mean the language, right? The generous offer, like Blinken, for Blinken to say the generous offer, it's like people are not even our viewers are not old enough necessarily to know how long that
A term.
trope of the generous offer goes. That's from 2000. That's from the 1990s Oslo Accords.
Yeah, that
And
was the second intifada when they were trying to quell Palestinian resistance and Palestinian solidarity in North America.
they
And they
said they
said that
gave them a
they
generous
gave them
offer.
everything and they never took it. Yeah. So, I mean, the captives' families have been saying that the U.S. has blessed a deal going back now two and a half
Yeah,
months.
I know. I know. But then yeah, and then you hear the Israeli negotiators are leaking that Netanyahu scuttles it every time they're
Well, Netanyahu
done.
said that he's going to Rafah with or without the prisoners. He said that to the prisoners' families, to the
Yeah.
captives' families.
Yeah, he's going to Rafa with or without a deal. Like, so what's the point of a deal? Why deal then? What?
No, and if you're looking at this from the Qassam Brigade's perspective, a month ago you had troops all over Gaza, month and a half ago,
Yeah,
and now you have none. They're not even in the buffer zones, which is what we talked about that we thought early on might be the plan was that they would situate their forces in the buffer zones.
they
They're
can't.
not doing, they can't do that. We've
They
seen on
can't.
video every
The
week
tunnels,
why they
there's
can't do that.
yeah.
And so they're not even in the borders, the buffer zones. So this is actually this corridor is the only way for Israel to actually have any kind of a foothold in Gaza. Um,
But it's got to be so dynamic because if they stay in one place for any length of time,
yeah, well, they turned the Turkish Friendship Hospital into a base.
mhm.
Um, so just like all the things they say Hamas does is, anyways, people have pointed that out before. All their lies are
Oh,
confessions, but
repetition. We can't be against repetition, John. That doesn't leave us with much
yeah, on day
new.
210.
I mean, yeah. All right. So, anything else?
No, I think that covered it. Sorry to our people for hearing that Pier thing twice, but it's interesting because our audience heard it twice in 2 days. Um, but we don't really hear this. I don't hear this on the CBC. I don't see it on the BBC talking about this.
I
So
don't
we're
watch that.
repeating ourselves, and they don't even touch it.
I don't watch that stuff. I just watch Telegram. I just scroll on Telegram all day, every day.
So
Scroll,
I guess you
scroll,
missed that
scroll.
the Americans told the Russians that they were and sanctioned them today for using chemical weapons in Ukraine. And you might ask, what's the chemical weapon?
Tear gas.
CS tear gas. You can't even make this stuff
Oh.
up.
I saw something like the US condemns Cuba for harsh jail sentences or something. Like the note
Literally
of
the
Colombia.
week that they're going coast to coast tear gassing students on campus,
Yeah.
tuition paying students on their own campuses
Do
in
you know tuition at Columbia University is like $70,000 a year?
I didn't know that, but I do now from these protests.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of knew international students paid that. I didn't know that people that lived in New York pay that. They just pay $500,000 for an undergraduate degree.
That you could have got for 50 cents in late fees at the public library. No, but I mean, yeah, it's weird. It's weird what the university's become. And I actually thought that that was enough. The debt, the system of debt, you know, the gradual um the student debt, the impossibility of finding a job that'll get you out of debt, the kind of steering people towards career-oriented education. I thought all of that was pacify. I thought that pacify. I thought I didn't, I was like, well, 6 months have passed and nothing happened on campuses. So obviously the university is different than it was. All these structural changes to the university have basically made the universities pacified. And then here we are.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people in those encampments that are foreign students too, right? That
Yeah.
their entire yeah, just what you already said on this show. They're just dismantling their credibility and their brand, whatever you want to call it. They're just making it a joke. Um, and Colombia kind of, yeah, I don't know, probably unfairly had a reputation for maybe being one of the places that was decent. It has an Institute for Palestine Studies.
Yeah.
Uh,
Is that where the journal is published?
I'm not sure if it's actually the Institute, but it's that yeah, that's a no. The Institute for Palestine Studies is based in Beirut,
Okay.
um, but they set up a department like Rashid Halidi runs a
Hmm.
department called
I saw him speak at the I saw a video of him speaking at the encampment
Center for Palestine Studies.
center. They have a center.
I don't know, no, like not that you set up a small department and it means that your school is that, but just for the school of Edward Said and
Joseph Massad, right?
Joseph Massad. Yeah. It's
All right. What are we gonna do next? I guess we'll see I mean, the pier is an evolving story. We'll have to follow it when it actually when it anchors when they anchor that thing to the beach. You guys come right back to this channel because we'll be here.
if you've been following us for the last 6 weeks of this Pier thing, don't leave now.
Don't leave now. Don't give up on us now. All right. Okay. Like, subscribe, etc. Please. And hang in there. This
Hang in
is
there.
yeah, we'll be back. This is a very dynamic situation. So we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.